Clare Church, who's a really good friend of mine from Colorado. She's been an educator there as well as a performer. She's had a great career, and so I'm really excited to hear all about it because she's played with some really famous people as well. And before I do that, I'm just going to go ahead and check on my Facebook to make sure that this has gone live on there, because I have to double check every time I do this. And for those who are watching, you can always wave at me, say hello to us. We'd love to hear your questions and comments if you have any. And if we miss any afterwards, we'll go ahead and I'll send them to Claire and she can answer them for you as well. So it looks like we're all set up. So before we start, I wanted to kind of explain a little bit about the dystonia classifications, because dystonia is confusing in general, because it's like, okay, this is called a movement disorder, but it's neurological, and how do they break it down? How do they classify it? And it's a lot of details. So I'm just going to kind of describe the cranial cervical dystonia, which is what Claire has. So this classification is very rare. It's only 8% of the dystonic population that has it. And it's difficult because it doesn't really have any sensory tricks or just that work on it. And it's very hard to find the certain triggers. It's both focal and segmental dystonia. So focal means isolated to one area, and segmental kind of in different, means different things trigger it besides just that one task. So like just not just playing the instrument, it could be chewing, it could be swallowing, it could be yawning, it could be talking that triggers it. It's usually primary, meaning it has no known pathophysiology. There's no known reason why it occurs, but sometimes it can be secondary. And if it is secondary, it's usually caused by something else, like tardive, which is drug-induced, peripheral-induced, neurodegenerative, or due to like a head injury or something. There have been some small cases of gene mutations found in early onset of this type of dystonia, but early onset means like, you know, childhood. And then some of the subtypes of this dystonia are, they classify them by jaw opening, jaw closing, jaw deviating, parietal dysfunction, or lingual. And when it occurs together with blepharospasm, or I can't say that, blepharospasm, which is eyelid dystonia, that's called cranial dystonia, also known as Meiges Syndrome. I don't know if I pronounced that right. And it has a lot of characteristics. You could have facial grimacing, lip pursing, other contortions, chewing movement. It's usually, for some cases, milder in the morning and disappears when asleep. But it can interfere with mastification, swallowing, verbal and nonverbal communication, teeth clenching, causing ulcers, involuntary jaw closure, jaw dislocation, TMJ overload. So it's quite painful, it sounds like.
It really is. Yeah, it really is. That was interesting because that is so accurate.
Yeah, and they said, I was reading an article and it says that the treatment usually requires multidisciplinary evaluation approaches, because sometimes it takes people really long to get diagnosed with this particular type of dystonia, because, you know, like you probably think right away, oh, it's triggered by my playing, but then you found out it's a lot more than that, right?
Yeah, that's kind of how what was with me. At first I wasn't. It was a long time before I figured stuff out. It seemed like I had embouchure dystonia, but I was having symptoms outside of playing some of the time, you know? And so that can happen for musicians who have embouchure dystonia. They can start to have symptoms. It can be triggered by other things in their mouth or whatever. That's not out of the question. So it was a little unclear. And I was working with a couple of different specialists, and I don't know if I should mention them by name, but I was working with a couple of specialists to try to get my playing back. And I'm not entirely certain if the work that I didn't accelerate the deterioration or the progression of the cranial dystonia, you know, because I kept just beating that dead horse. I just kept putting that thing in my mouth, trying to play. And I'm super relentless. So I did it like quite a bit longer than I was directed to do so. You know, like if she said do 5 minutes, I would do 2 hours, that sort of behavior, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and you're like me, a A-type personality. Like it's just like, okay, I gotta fix this. You know, like I want to fix it. So we try to figure a way to do it, and it's just like something we don't give up on. We just really grind at it as much as we can.
Yeah.
And I know who you're talking about, because when I talk, Claire and me have met a couple times while in Colorado. to chat about our experiences and converse. And we also, as music educators, Claire has been like a really inspiring person to me to look up to as a band director, and especially in our area of jazz. She's awesome. So yeah, I know who you're talking about. And it's hard because, you know, with the different types of dystonia that can affect us as musicians, especially when it carries over to other tasks, and it's more a severe form of it that carries on, it's really hard to figure out, like, or it's hard to explain to people, like, you know, this is not just a simple, you know, like a simple thing. This isn't just like, well, it just affects me right here, or it's just, you know, one little thing. It's hard to describe to people what's going on. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But first of all, I just wanted to start off by kind of asking you about your musical upbringing. What really got you into sax playing? What made you passionate about it? And how did you go into that area of study?
Oh, this is interesting because when I was, in fourth grade and we were choosing instruments, I wanted to be a drummer, and my mom said there will be no drums in this house, and so she had a friend who was a nun. Interestingly, a nun who, if you ever saw The Trouble with Angels, the movie was based on this woman who was a friend of my dad's. They got their masters together. That's just a little trivia. And she gave us a clarinet. And I really remember my mom giving me this clarinet. And I remember looking at it like, this is not at all what I had in mind. I wanted to play drums or trumpet, something loud. So I played clarinet for about a year. Then I switched to bass clarinet because I didn't want to be in the clarinet section. I wanted to be the only one. And then I started playing baritone saxophone in jazz band, and I discovered volume, you know. And I was tiny. I'm 5'2" right now. So when I was in sixth grade, I don't even know how little I was, but I remember that it was, you know, quite large for my size. But I really like, I had an affinity for the saxophone. I ended up getting both of my degrees in saxophone performance, one at Northern Illinois University and one at CU Boulder. And interestingly, they were in classical saxophone because they didn't have jazz degrees then. And also, I loved playing classical saxophone. I loved the challenge of it. So,
and you've played in orchestras too. Like you played in Colorado Symphony quite a bit of times, and San Francisco as well.
Symphony, the Oakland Symphony, Rockford Symphony, San Francisco. I was part of the kind of the on-call saxophone section. Colorado Music Festival. Now, there's not a lot of literature that features saxophone, but what there is pretty great. You know, like the symphonic dances, Bernstein symphonic dances on West Side Story is one of my favorites, and of course all the Gershwin, and so yeah, and pops. We did a lot of pops, of course.
Well, that's awesome. And yeah, you went on to study it in college and get your degree on, even though jazz wasn't a primary emphasis then. Were you still doing like kind of jazz stuff outside of school then, or how did you get involved in that?
Well, I was playing a jazz band in high school, of course. And then when I went to Northern Illinois University, they had a really good jazz band. They were, recognized as one of the top jazz bands in the country. And I auditioned and I got in. And in fact, I was the first female instrumentalist to get
Whoa.
ever. They had female vocalists, but no female instrumentalists. And we did a lot of cool stuff. We went on tour twice a year. We made recordings, and we had guest soloists who were quite well known. You know, Marvin Stamm, Carl Fontana, Don Menza, Lou Marini Jr. We played with Louis Bellson quite a bit, like, several times, and even was his house band in Chicago, this college band, which you can imagine what a firestorm that set off in the professional music community. They were pretty cranky about that.
That's awesome, Claire. And I'm glad that you're such a trailblazer and being the first female there too as well. That's awesome.
Yeah, and so as soon as I got out of college, well, by the time I got out of college in 1982, I was starting to get calls to do pops type concerts. So I did my very first gig. I can't remember which was first, but I think my first gig was with Tony Bennett and the Rockford Symphony. And
Oh my gosh.
I think my second gig was with the Temptations and the Four Tops. They were touring together at the time. And, I'm like 22 years old, and out comes the Temptations with their like yellow tails and there's dance steps, and I mean, I was super starstruck. Plus, the music is awesome, right? I was playing Barry sax, and the Barry sax parts in that music, the Motown Barry sax parts, they're like why you play Barry, you know?
Hmm. Oh man, that's awesome, Claire. And I know that you played with so many professional musicians along the way, and you eventually ended up going to San Francisco, right, or something?
Yeah, we moved. We first moved. My husband is also a saxophone player, quite a great woodwind player as well. And first we moved to Portland, Oregon, where we thought we were going to do this, trailblaze this jazz career. It took us about 2 years to figure out there wasn't really anything going on in Portland, Oregon at the time. So we moved down to the Bay Area and we lived in Oakland for 7 years. And during that time, I played in the Fairmont Jazz Orchestra, the Venetian Room, which was a band where or a place where stars would come through. So every week there'd be a new star. So I got to play with Mel Torme and, gosh, I'm having trouble remembering George Shearing. Um, I can't remember any of the others, but basically people who were of note would come through, and we would just be the accompaniment. And then I also got into I played with Benny Carter's big band, Dizzy Gillespie's big band when he came through. And the big one for me was that I played in Joe Henderson's big band. I was one of the members of Joe Henderson's San Francisco-based big band for the entire time, which was a huge, he was a legend to me along the lines of Sonny Rollins or John Coltrane. So that,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Claire. And during this time you were playing, were you just primarily playing then Barry, or did you also switch between different like instruments? Like I know in jazz bands sometimes you switch to like clarinet, or you do something else.
Barry bass clarinet and alto sax mostly, and some flute. There's almost always some flute doubles in big bands, and I would play alto more in the jazz improvisation setting, like if I was going to play in a small group, and I would play Barry the big gigs, the gigs where I was playing with famous people in big arenas was almost always Barry.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And yeah, you've had quite a bit of opportunities, and you eventually got asked to do the Aspen Music Festival, right?
That was early. That was in 1983. I got a National Endowment for the Arts grant to go study in New York City with Dave Liebman. So I went out to New York City to Long Island, and I had about 3 lessons off and on with him over a year period. And while I was there, I played at this little women's jazz festival in Soho, and Rufus Reed was there. And he heard me, and he asked if I'd be interested. He told me they needed a Barry player he said, you don't by any chance play Barry? Of course, I have my alto. And he said, because they need a Barry player at this Aspen Music Festival. They're starting a jazz program, and would you be interested? And I was like, sure, I would love that. And so 2 years in a row, I went out there, and that's where I met Brad Good. And the second year I was there, funny story, there was this kid who was 13 years old who was just this badass jazz player. And a few years ago, he was 13, so he became Brad Good's Brad became his legal guardian for the
Oh wow.
summer. So a few years ago, Brad said, so you remember when Chris Potter was at Aspen Music Festival? I said, no, I don't remember Chris Potter ever being at Aspen Music Festival. And Brad goes, the kid? The kid? And I went, the kid was Chris Potter? Are you serious? So I didn't know. The
Oh
kid.
my gosh, that's so funny. That's
Yeah.
crazy. And for those of you out there, Brad Giz is the trumpet professor at CU Boulder currently. So
Renowned, throughout the country as a trumpet jazz phenom.
yeah, he's awesome. And I've had some friends also that have worked with him who have had embouchure issues as well. So
Yeah.
and then Claire, you definitely did quite a bit of playing, and you've done recordings as well. And you actually still had a little bit of a tie-in with drum playing as well, because weren't you like you met someone that kind of taught you drums, or
Yeah, at Aspen Music Festival, John Riley was there, and he's quite a famous drummer. He was there one of the summers I was there for the whole time, and he taught me a couple of beats. He taught me a couple of Elvin Jones mambos, which are these Afro-Cuban beats. And I seem to pick it up pretty quick. And I just realized I could have been a good drummer. And I always tell people like, God, I could have been such a good drummer if I had started on it. But, you know, I got this career. So yeah, and I played the drums very sporadically. Like I would sit in if somebody needed a break. I would play a swing beat for 5 minutes, but I didn't practice, and I didn't, you know, I didn't really take it seriously until I had to.
Yeah, and well, I mean that's really good because you were really focused on your career and your sax playing, and you're so really talented at it as well. And somewhere along the way, when would you say this about happened? Came about your run-in with dystonia?
I I had my front caps replaced about 2009, and they weren't right. And I started feeling like when I was playing clarinet, especially, I couldn't find my embouchure. I kept trying to find it, and it was very bothersome. And but you know, you keep playing, and then I started having nerve pain when I was playing, and I couldn't put my teeth on the mouthpiece, so I started playing with a double lip, and then I started fixating on the embouchure, like what's going on, you know, looking in a mirror and trying different mouthpieces, and this is the spiral that I think starts embouchure dystonia. In my opinion, it's that something changes, the feel changes sort of dramatically, and you start focusing on it from a sensory motor standpoint. And it got worse. And I really knew something was up when I was teaching. I was teaching fifth graders, and I was trying to play the theme to Star Wars on my alto saxophone. And you know, you have to hold notes a pretty long time in that song. And I played the G and the D, and I'm holding the D, and I'm getting this very strong tremor, like vibrato, but not what I want. Not,
Yeah.
and I remember my partner who sort of looking at me with some concern, like, what's going on? What is that? And I didn't know what was going on. And then I had a gig on clarinet, a church gig, and I did okay at the rehearsal, but I was clenching. I was starting to have a lot of trouble keeping my jaw open. If I put something in my mouth, I couldn't keep my jaw open. So I was starting to have trouble staying in tune up high on all the instruments. But on clarinet was the first one to really feel like, oh my God, something is not right. And then alto. We were making our second CD at this time. And to my humiliation, we were playing a tune where I had to hold a high A on the alto, which is a squirrely note anyway. You know, it wants to be, it could be here or here. It's got all kinds of, I couldn't get it in tune. I could not bring it into tune. I was sharp and I couldn't do anything about it. And so we had to auto tune it. And I was, you know, I've always been a really, I've always had great intonation. So that was another like red flag. By the time I got to I had an Easter gig, March 25th, I remember that, of 2013. I could not keep my jaw open at all. And so I just wedged the clarinet between my teeth and I just closed them on it and I just played the gig. And by the time, and I was having so much pain in my jaw and neck, so much pain. I just can't even tell you. It was debilitating. And then I had a friend in the Bay Area that had embouchure dystonia and had to stop playing the saxophone. And it was right about late February that year that I knew what I had. Like I didn't know I had this. I knew I had dystonia of some sort. You know, and of course, as any musician that figures this out or gets this diagnosis can tell you, I was horrified. I was absolutely horrified. Like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I just kept saying that. What am I going to do? You
Oh my
know,
gosh.
I
And
I had gigs. I had gigs through the summer. You know.
yeah, and it's such a tragedy for us because, you know, it's almost like, you know, some people, we hear the news and we kind of, you know, go into denial. We're like, well, I can kind of force myself to keep playing. I'll be okay, you know, but and then, you know, for a lot of us, we get the news and it's just like right away, you know, arrow to the heart. Um, you know, oh my God, I can't believe it that this is real.
saying, I think this is real. I think this is real. And of course, I, as I'm sure you understand, I became extremely depressed, extremely depressed, which doesn't help, you know. Um, and I refused Botox because musicians who are trying to retrain, I was determined that I was going to get my playing back. I was certain of it. I mean, I had no doubt I was going to get back. And I worked with, of course, this specialist in a couple different places for 10 months, and we couldn't get it back. Then I went to Joaquin Farias in Spain, in Sevilla, Spain, and did a week with him. And I got some stuff out of that, but it still seemed like I couldn't figure out. I just kept thinking, why am I not recovering? I'm doing everything right. Why am I not recovering? Other musicians seem to recover. I just couldn't understand it. Well, of course, then I ended up going to Terrassa, Spain, and working with this Institute Physiologia of Music and Art.
Yeah.
And because they had an 80% recovery rate, they said. Well, honestly, it was one of the coolest trips of my life. And it was kind of my Hail Mary. But within an hour, they had told me to put the horn away. They said, put it away. It's too much of a trigger. You have triggers. Breathing is a trigger. Talking is a trigger. Being, living is a trigger for me. So it became clear as I was working on what they had given me that I had to make a choice. I'd started playing the drums. I was practicing the drums pretty hard, and I was doing this retraining. And I had to make a choice. Do I keep pushing this? Because I wasn't getting better. I was getting worse. I was getting worse, And I had to it took me a long time. Don't get me wrong. It sounds so easy now. But I had to sort of accept, like, oh, I have something more chronic. I have this other thing because I have symptoms all the time. Like if my teeth are together and I'm listening and not talking, my teeth are clenching and they're clenching hard, and that's with 40 units of Botox in each masseter and temporalis. So,
Yeah, and it happens with, like when you're at rest, right? When you're just, it could be, you're just going about your day and, you know, something sets it off.
it happens all the time. If I relax and my teeth are touching, my jaw will see how hard it can clench. And I'm not willing to find out. So I'm always opening my jaw repeatedly to make sure that those teeth don't get too much, they don't get too bear down on each other. And we've been working on the Botox, getting it cranked up, higher and higher without too much. My facial expressions are impaired. I can only smile on one side, and that's kind of common with this dystonia, even if you don't have Botox. And I have other little grimacy sneer. I sneer, which is so attractive. Like the whole full Dick Cheney sneer. And I,
Dick Cheney's here.
right? So that's, but the thing I gotta emphasize is, I'm through it. I got through it. Like it was a freaking hard road. I broke a lot of teeth and had to have a bridge put in, and
So it really affects your jaw, and do you have any jaw deviation then, or jaw dislocation that happens with it?
I'm starting to have something with this joint, honestly, that sometimes it does this. I have some deviation, and it just clenches, and the muscles, suboccipitals, SCMs, platysma, you can see they're always trying. I also have blepharospasm, so if I'm listening and trying to keep my jaw from opening, my eyes get involved and they start closing. Here's a real interesting thing. I don't have symptoms when I'm drumming. I might sneer or make some funny faces, but I don't have clenching. It's amazing.
Wow. Then it must definitely not be, the arm or the hand isn't a segmental trigger for it.
I had I also learned to tap dance during this period because I just wanted to. And I used to have a lot of mirror movements. Like if I was doing stuff with my feet, my hands would do it. Or if I did one hand, my other hand would do it. But I honestly think that playing the drums saved me from the spread into my limbs. I really do. Because it was I definitely had some of that. I have some writer's cramp, which is pretty common too if you have segmental dystonia, but like something about where your brain goes when you're in a flow state, um, skiing, mountain biking, playing the drums, riding a horse. I have a horse. Something about that flow state, uh, it breaks it down, it reboots it. And I don't understand it, but I know that um, it's a common theme among musicians or among people with dystonia that flow state seems to stop it somehow.
Yeah, it is interesting because, when I watch the videos of the people who have more severe forms of dystonia, like general dystonia, or where, their legs get so contorted that they can't walk or something. And then when they go to sleep, they're completely normal. Like there's nothing happening. But as soon as they wake up, that very second, they can't walk again because their legs are just in the automatic, kind of twisting state, this kind of contortion state.
The cool thing about that whole about that brain stuff is that like Farias has done some stuff, figured out some things where people that can't walk, if they can't walk because they can't walk forwards, they can walk backwards, or they can run, or they can hop. So like I don't know what it is. For me, talking is better than not talking, and that's common with Meiges patients. In fact, it's kind of a joke among neurologists that you can tell if someone has Meiges because you can't get them to shut up.
Oh gosh, that's so sad, but it's also funny. I'm sorry.
I'm walking, exercise is a trigger, just like walking, biking, anything that's strenuous. So I have to talk or sing the whole time, So I'm like the crazy woman out there on the just talks to herself. I don't
Well, Claire, I enjoyed talking to you, so you can talk to me anytime. It's fine.
know.
And yeah, I mean, it's just you've gone through a lot. I remember when we first met, you're telling me about like how much pain you were in your jaw and your face, and it was interesting because I hadn't really experienced that amount of intensity of pain. Was there anything at all that you found that somewhat reduced the level of pain or helped you in any way, even just minuscule?
um, well, I do take baclofen, which is a antispasmodic. It's like a muscle relaxant, but it's not really for like sore muscles. It's for people with MS and Parkinson's and stuff like that. I take that at night. When it's really, really bad, I occasionally will take clonazepam, which is that one is a tricky one because I was addicted to it. Like a lot of people, like anybody that takes clonazepam for any length of time will become dependent. And I had to get off of it, which was really hard. So I'm super careful with that, but that does give me relief. Sometimes heat does, talking, of course, and if I can get somebody to work out the muscles in my neck, because these suboccipitals and SCMs are very connected to the jaw. So right now I can't get massages, but massage really helps.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I definitely feel like massage for all the forms of dystonia helps a lot because even with Embouchure dystonia, I feel like a lot of people have a certain degree of neck tension
Yeah.
involved, and it really sucks. I mean, it's like even just the slightest degree of neck tension, it interferes in such a bad way when you try to play or do anything. It just hurts.
It's amazing how much stuff is connected. Like the traps are so connected too. Like all of these muscles from the jaw all the way down to the traps are connected. So, and that was one of the interesting things when I started having it is I couldn't figure out where all the pain was coming from. It never occurred to me that like the the effort of keeping my jaw open and in the right position to play the horn was causing all this other pain.
Yeah, because even it even hurts probably just to try to just like, hang the jaw open or just keep the jaw at a certain position. It's just,
Open. I wish I could. That would feel really super great.
yeah, it's really resistance. And I always tell people a lot of time with dystonia, it takes a lot of physical effort to even just try to retrain. Whether, we all have different severities of it. But even at the lightest severity, it's still very taxing, on our jaw to try to work through this. So we have to be very careful with what we're doing, because I went through the process where I was doing really good in rehabilitation. And then when I was actually going to see a boulder, that's when I started experiencing pain in the right side of my jaw. And I went to that neurodentistry, and the guy told me like, yeah, there's something off with your jaw joint, and there's some type of buildup back here. And he did like, the TENS unit. And then Claire was awesome because I couldn't afford a TENS unit at the time, and it was really helping me. And for those of you who don't know what TENS unit is, it's basically like a little electro pads you kind of connect to your face, and you can change the signal strength to try, and different pulses to kind of, and it's supposed to interfere with the pain signal so that it gives your muscles a chance to relax without, constantly being in pain. So I did that at the dentistry, which was really expensive. And then Claire was awesome, and she lent me her TENS unit for a while. And then I eventually bought my own. So thank you, Claire, for that. I never said thank you for that. So thank you so much. It helped me out a lot.
That I should try to locate that TENS machine and see if it helps me, because it's been, it's definitely been painful. I'm used to it, and I don't get bummed about it anymore. I'm kind of used to it, but it's a good idea to try the TENS machine again.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like some things help at different stages. Because one thing that would have helped me now might have not helped me back then, and it's dystonia is just a weird thing. It's very weird. It changes too sometimes.
So weird. It's so weird. And even neurologists say that. They'll say, well, dystonia is weird, so you should try something for 2 weeks, and then you don't know if it's going to work because the dystonia is going to go up and down no matter what you're doing.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to do a quick shout out. So we have quite a few people watching. John, again, John, I can never say your name, John. He's gonna have to just voicemail me or something, like saying his last name, because I can never say it. I'm so sorry. Anyways, John, hello. He's a trumpet player with cervical dystonia, and he's always been watching the videos. So thank you so much, John. Tyler Richardson is watching, who we both know. Hi, Tyler. Thank you so much. He says, hi, Claire and Katie. You both are inspiring. Thank you and miss you both.
Oh.
Yeah, Tyler, you're awesome. Tyler's a trumpet player, we both know. So I went to school with him, and Claire did, was he doing practicum with you, I think, at one point?
He was one of our marching band instructors at the high school where I teach.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Tyler, for joining in. We both miss you as well. So Claire, thank you for sharing so much about your journey and everything, and that with your symptoms and everything. I know it's difficult for some people to talk about what they experience, and so it's always very painful for you. Did you and I know this is a basic question, but do you then have to use like a mouth guard to sleep, or any type of like dental devices?
I wear a mouth guard at night. Although, your symptoms do reduce at night. I find if I wear it in the daytime, though, my jaw just clenches on it even harder. It just finds that thing. That's fun for it. Um, you know, um, and I wanted to just tell people like what my experience, because I've really done a lot of research, obviously, and talked to a lot of people, is that the younger you are, the better your chances of recovery. That is my opinion. I don't know a lot of people my age that didn't ultimately switch instruments, unfortunately. But there is a light, like it's okay. I'm okay. And I'm having like transcendent musical experiences again as a drummer, and I didn't think that would ever happen for me again, and that was the main source of my depression. So when I do play with people, I'm playing well, and I'm having great musical experiences. I don't get back what I lost, but I did make it through, and people will make it through.
Well, thanks, Claire. I know you've gone through so much, and I'm really proud of everything that you've done. And you've always been an inspiration to me, not just as a musician, but as an educator as well. And it's true, like what you're saying. Stephanie said a similar thing when I was interviewing her, the flute player with the Met. She said, she said I gave a speech to at this flute event, and she said the majority of the audience was older people, like I mean, like people who are probably already retired musicians. And she said it's really important to talk to the younger generations about this, so that if they ever end up in the same situation, they know about it, because it tends to affect, I think the percentage is like the median age is like 30s or something, like in that area. So she said it's really important to find ways to reach out to younger generations to talk about this, because if they get it at like when like they're 30 or something, they at least have a chance to and information to try to retrain and capture it while they're still young, and I know it's unfortunate either way, but yeah. And I'm glad that you've been able to do your drumming as well, because and I'm really happy to hear that you've been having these experiences with your drumming too, because I know when I first like a couple times after I met you, you're talking about getting into drumming at the time, and then it just kind of took off, like you just started gigging everywhere and playing at these places, and I'm really happy for you. And you've formed quite a bit of different groups as well. So you're doing your the expedition group, and then there's a couple other ones as well. Can you kind of explain, was it a little bit nerve-wracking going back onto stage again then on drums?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard putting yourself out there, not being great. I was used to being great. I was like, I knew that I could do anything. Whatever anybody asked me to do, I knew I could do it. And I don't mean that to sound arrogant. It was just like, the knowledge, the feedback from years of like, yeah, sure, put it in front of me, I'll play it. I knew I could do it. And then now I'm a drummer, and I know there's some things I cannot do. I mean, I've gotten a lot better now, but at the time, there was things I'd be like, I know what I want to do. I can hear it. My body won't produce it yet. What I think saved me is I did so much. I've been teaching for so long that I knew how to break things down for myself. Oh, where's the problem? How do I solve the problem? What are the things I need to do to solve this technical problem? That's been great. And that's just, I mean, I've been fortunate that I knew so much about teaching, and also that I had some independence of limbs from messing around with the drums as a young person, because you don't get independence at 53. Like that doesn't happen. So luckily I already had it.
Oh, that's awesome, Claire. And really good advice too. I mean, just being able to play a secondary instrument, how important that is. And Catherine said that too in her interview, that she said, "Thank goodness I had a secondary instrument to play that I actually liked." You know, so many of us are when we go to college and we're like, well, we kind of had to learn piano as a secondary instrument just to get through college, and some of us hate it and some of us love it, and so it's always good to have a secondary instrument that you actually enjoy playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you've been playing the drums and gigging as well. So if let's say, for example, someone came to you and said, hey, I think or they've been diagnosed with dystonia, it could be embouchure or it could be cranial, what would be kind of some advice that you would give them?
Well, if it was embouchure dystonia, if they were young enough, I guess I would, advise them to try to retrain. One of the main things I tell people is get into meditating, get a meditation practice going, try to calm down your nervous system. I think the whole family of dystonias. I think Dr. Frias has a pretty good assessment of all the dystonias, that they're an overactive nervous system, central nervous system that's kind of on fire. And we all know that stress makes it worse. We all know that calming down our nervous system makes it better. So anything you can do that does that for you, and I think meditation is a big one. Meditation, exercise, whatever works for you. So I would say get into a meditation practice, get into some massage, um, start retraining with someone who knows, who's been through it, and do it in a very gentle way. Like be gentle with yourself. I wasn't gentle with myself. I'm a super determined person. And that can be your downfall, you know. You've got to be determined in a very gentle way.
Yeah, I agree. And I did, I did this the same thing too, because my first 2 years I really plowed through retraining, and I was recovering, and then like I said, I started feeling this jaw pain because I was pushing myself too much, and not really listening to my body, or no understanding what it means to listen to my body, or what that entails, because you know I just didn't understand my dystonia that well at the point of time, and I didn't have anyone to really help me, guide me through the process. And I agree with the meditation. That's awesome. And just to kind of backtrack to the practitioners, and I know it's hard to find someone to really work with that understands what you're going through. Would you say that, well, I always say, like, keep an open mind, be objective, because like you can always take, keep or disregard certain things that you learn from different people. Would you say that they're like that first practitioner you worked with, were they beneficial to you at all?
Yeah, um, there was some degree of um, that there was one way and only way and only one way, you know? And for me, that might not have been the best thing because when it became clear that that way wasn't going to work, um, it was very demoralizing. It was really devastating to find out that this person couldn't actually help me. Um, it was like a secondary blow after the first one. Um, but I think that after going to I've been to four different, paths now. And what they all have in common, in my opinion, is that this is a sensory motor disorder, and that the best thing you can do for yourself is to reduce your stress, find a better way to handle your stress, and get your nervous system back on track. And that your overall health, you have to take care of your overall health, like nutrition and exercise and meditation and all of the things that you can do. Musicians, if you're a serious musician, you're probably neglecting some things. Um, that's probably fair to say.
Yeah, I agree.
Because we're so driven, we have to be. So those are that's how I helped myself. It was really a sort of a completely holistic change. Now things are not perfect for me. I have pain, I have symptoms all the time. I'm always managing them, but I'm having a good life. I'm having a normal life. I'm doing fun things, and uh, I am not depressed anymore. And I just, as much as a lot of musicians would look at my story and be like, well, that's a freaking tragedy. Like, you didn't get your playing back. True. But I found a way forward and my life is okay.
Yeah, and that's inspiring as well. And that's why I do these talks, because I feel like it's important to hear both sides of the stories of people who have recovered and can play again, and people who have found a way around it, or a way to evolve their life, and still find the same type of fulfillment in what they're doing. I mean, it's really important because as musicians, we are still musicians, whether we can play or not. We still have this in us. We still have that drive to express ourselves, and to compose, to do creative work in any means that we can.
And that's a
um,
hard thing to hear at first. Early on, it was very hard to hear that. People would say, oh, you're still a great musician. I'd be like, so? So that's just a curse, right? I couldn't hear it. It took a long time to be able to hear it. And now I get it, and the way I play the drums is different than other people because I play the drums coming from it a melodic and a harmonic standpoint. You know, I don't play like other drummers, and that's okay. I'm okay with that.
And that's awesome, Claire. I'm so proud of you too, by the way. That's awesome. I have John chiming in, and he said no problem with the not being able to pronounce his last name. I'll just call him John K. So John K, he asks, what do you do about the phenomenon of bringing your attention to the physical location of your dystonia, I can't say that word, exasperating or triggering the symptoms?
God, is that so true? And that's why meditation is hard with this dystonia because it is so tricky. That's why it's important to get into a flow state somehow. Like, what is the thing that takes you away from it? Do that thing. It took me a long time to figure it out, you know? I just would be like, hey, when I'm skiing, I don't have symptoms. How weird is that? Oh, hey, I mean, when things were super bad, I had a really bad flare up the past 2 months, 3 months. It got bad, and nothing was working, and Botox wasn't working, and I was in distance, so much stress. And I figured out, oh, I can go down and play the drums for 20 minutes or a half hour, and it will break it up. It will break the cycle. So what can you do to break the cycle? You know, there has to be something. I would, if people are into checking it out, Dr. Joaquin Farias does have an online platform. It's called dystoniarecovery.com. And he does work with musicians, but he's just about like, what are the ways you can reset your brain? And there's dance and exercises and meditations and eye movements and stuff. And I really do think there's merit in his approach. After being with a lot of different people, I think there's merit in his approach. So that might be something for John to check out and see if it's helpful. It's not expensive, and you can do it for a month and see if you like it.
Yeah, I agree. And that program's really amazing. I checked it out as well. And I love his concept of an approach of retraining dystonia and all the various forms of dystonia. Because I feel like he really brings it back to how important movement is. So if you can do a movement that doesn't trigger the dystonia, and finding ways to kind of bleed that over into the areas where you're having difficulties and retain that state of stableness, that helps a lot. And it could be anything, like, you know, like he has that patient that had really severe torticollis, where his head couldn't, you know, move in this direction, and he was just in so much pain and frustration because he couldn't function. And he relearned how to realign himself through lots of physical work with him, and also dancing. He's like, dancing saved my life because it made me move in different ways than what I was used to, and just get back to moving muscle groups and parts of my body I'm not used to using all the time. And I think that's very true for musicians too, because we have our instrument literally glued to us like 24/7. We're just constantly in this type of posture and position all the time. I know, like with horn playing, it's like sometimes when I was younger, I realized, wow, my right arm is like really buff compared to my left because I'm so used to lifting my horn up on this side.
Yeah.
So yeah, trying to find a balance too, you know, in movement.
Trick your
Um,
brain. You got to trick your brain. That was what I learned in Terrassa. Is like they would have you try to play while doing something challenging. I don't know, stand on one foot. Stand on one foot and put your hand on your head and play your trumpet. And trick yourself, and then do a different thing and play a note, because you're trying to break up that whatever that signal is in the brain. I did find that helpful. It's just I couldn't keep going with it. You know, I was like, well, this isn't working quick enough, and I need to be moving on.
Yeah, well, and it's hard, you know, after so many years to remain in a state of pain or dysfunction. You know, it really is challenging to do that type of work on yourself physically. It's taxing.
For
Um,
sure.
yeah. Well, Claire, thank you so much. I'm really happy with everything that you've been explaining. And you've had such a tremendous career. And I know this is kind of random, but I was just looking at my paper because I wrote notes down, and I didn't realize that you were born in Chicago, or you're raised in Chicago.
Raised near Chicago. I grew up in Geneva, Illinois, which is about 50 miles west of Chicago. And that's where I sort of made my first way in the music scene, was in the Chicago music scene. So I have lots of friends still back there.
Ah, so you're originally a Midwestern.
For sure. Yeah.
That's good. I'm so happy. I'm being all biased right now. Well, let me check here and see. Johnson, thank you so much for answering that question. Really good advice. Hi to everyone else that has been watching. I'm sorry I haven't been able to wave back to everyone. Yeah, there's quite a few. So hello to everyone that's been watching us go along here. We're almost ready to tie this up here, but let's go ahead and try and talk a little bit about go back to treatments just a little bit. So you were saying that you were taking that medication. I can never pronounce it. Clozapine?
People probably know it as Klonopin, and Klonopin is often prescribed for anxiety. Another interesting thing about dystonia is that the part of the brain that is active in dystonias is also active in moods and emotions. And people probably know this, that like anxiety produces spasms and spasms produce anxiety, and it's sort of a ridiculous loop, right? Once you start having spasms, you get anxious. Once you start getting anxious, you have more spasms. So anything you can do to calm down that anxiety is going to tamper with that feedback loop. So clonazepam is the go-to treatment, Klonopin, for people who don't do Botox injections. And I was taking it, and baclofen and Artane, which is another common drug for dystonia, all at the same time.
Oh my gosh, Claire, that's a lot of side effects.
Yeah. And I had to like taper off all of them, and that took me about 16 months, and I had a year of protracted withdrawal. But at this juncture, I'm back on the baclofen, a very small dosage, and it does seem to help me. And clonazepam or Klonopin is very effective, super effective, which is the problem, because I don't want to get dependent on it. So I know that it works if I take a low dosage of it. If I'm desperate, I'll take a low dosage of it. But I can't take it more than every 4 days. It's got a long half-life. Yeah, so it's really tempting because it works great. It's really an effective medication. I also get, like I said, I get Botox injections. I get 2 shots in each masseter and 2 or 3 shots up here in the temporalis muscles. And we've been amping the dosage up. And once we get that dialed in, I think I'll be in better shape. I'm going to see Dr. Berman. Brian Berman is a very renowned movement disorder specialist, dystonia specialist at Anschutz in Denver. And I'm going back to see him. He's wonderful. And he's going to use EMG guidance to get the shots into these lateral pterygoids, which you can't get without EMG. And I think that's going to be the ticket for me.
Oh, that's awesome. I was going to ask about the Botox, if it was difficult finding the right dosage and amount, and if with the technology. I know that they like Dr. Frucht was saying, they've been working a lot on using different methods to try and find a better way to treat the very specific areas that you need it in.
It's tricky. I mean, it doesn't happen overnight. You have to work with someone, because you have to wait 3 months. So you try locations and dosages, and then 3 months later you go back and say, well, that wasn't great, and I still have this. So we're getting there. But I think that for me, I can feel that even with the masseters weakened, I can feel there's a lot of clenching. So it's got to be coming from other muscles, and I really think it's right in the joint, which is those pterygoid muscles. I think they are strong little boogers, and we gotta put some Botox in them.
Yeah, I agree. People would be surprised how many problems you can have with the jaw joint. And we never think of it as musicians, which is kind of odd. We hear of TMJ and that's about it, but we never really think about the function of the jaw joint, or how much control it really does have and ties into our nerves and our facial movement as well, just on a daily basis. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And then with the I can never say it again, the clozapine.
Pin, because that's the easy one.
Yeah, I think I was doing an interview with Jamie, who plays trumpet, and he was saying he started that, and he said that it really affected his sleep cycle because he couldn't go to sleep. He said it really made him really energetic. Or no, wait, it was opposite. It made him go to sleep. He felt really tired all the time. Sorry.
Klonopin, it's Klonopin in the daytime, and I take a really low dosage. I mean, it's benzodiazepines. They're tricky drugs because they do actually mess with your sleep cycle. They make you skip some of your sleep cycle. So people think they're sleeping well because they fall asleep so easily. And most of us have some anxiety because of the dystonia. We don't sleep easily. Most of us tricky sleepers. So clonazepam or Klonopin will put you to sleep, but it will have you skip a restorative sleep cycle in the middle of your sleep. So that's what I mean. Benzodiazepines are very tricky drugs. They're super addictive. They're very hard to get off of, and they have some side effects that are not great. One of which is an increased risk of dementia or memory problems or cognitive issues. And that's a deal breaker for me. So I really advise people to be super careful with benzodiazepines, with Valium or Klonopin or Xanax. I can tell you from bitter experience that you should be careful with them. I prefer Botox because I'm not trying to get if you use Botox and you're trying to fix embouchure dystonia, you might be making it harder for yourself, right? Which is why I didn't use it for a long time. But for where I'm at, Botox doesn't affect the neurotransmitters in my brain. It's at the point where the muscle and the nerve fiber meet, and it wears off. So it doesn't affect my brain chemistry. So to me, that's a better trade.
Yeah, really great descriptions and details about it, and advice as well, because I know a lot of people will avoid trying oral medications or that kind of thing because one is a scary thing to them, but also it's hard to find someone to talk to about it that has experience with it. So I'm really glad that you brought it up and have been talking about it, because I mean, I can't tell you how many people are like, yeah, I want to try this, but I have no idea,
I can tell you, if people are interested, I have taken Artane, Baclofen, Gabapentin, and Klonopin. And I can get, and some other ones too. I've tried Mexilatine, which is a very experimental drug. I've tried Tizanidine, which is another muscle relaxant. And I can tell you a little bit about each of them from my experience. If people want to get in touch with me, I'm happy to talk to them. They all dystonia drugs have the potential for cognitive issues. And I just can't handle that. I want my wits. So like I said, I prefer the Botox at this point.
Yeah, I agree, and I like that you also mentioned that with dystonia we have this kind of cyclical thing that happens with the anxiety, because it's like, our 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 dystonic reaction happens, and then we have a reaction to that dystonic reaction, and then we have a reaction to that other reaction, and it goes it just kind of ties into one another.
It's important to understand, excuse me for interrupting, it's important to understand that it's not just that we are anxious because we feel spasms. Those two things are comorbid. There's a comorbidity, physiological comorbidity between dystonia and these moods. In other words, people think, oh, you have anxiety because you have, no, they're in the same, they're part of the same disorder. They're considered to be comorbid. So don't stigmatize yourself. Be like, oh yeah, I have anxiety and sometimes depression because my moods are part of the same disorder. So it's really important to understand that they're physiologically comorbid.
Yeah, and it makes sense why the drug it kind of entails both those things, because I think it was recently somebody had written in one of the groups a really kind of strange phenomenon I can't remember his name, but he was taking, I think it was Chantix, which is like a smoking drug that you take to kind of, it blocks the inhibitors in the brain, blocks the chemical that goes out to tell you that it feels good to smoke. Like when you go to smoke, it feels good, and it blocks that kind of sensation. And he started taking that, and he said, I kid you not, my dystonia went away. It's gone. When I take this, it's completely gone. And it kind of, you know, same thing. He said, but he said this drug was made to interfere with that emotion, that emotional need to want to smoke, you know.
Yeah, I mean, things like people probably don't know that Benadryl is an anticholinergic like Artane. And so when people have acute dystonia, sometimes they'll take Benadryl and it will help. And sometimes it makes it worse. You know, dystonia is super weird. So sometimes it helps. But there's a lot of things. I also take CBD oil. Sometimes that helps. Um, you know, I'm not too sure.
And then is your dystonia at all dopa responsive? Like dopamine help at all?
I tried that and it's not dope. I wish, because when you are dopamine responsive, it's like a cure almost to take Cinemat. It didn't help me at all.
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, I haven't come across a lot of people that have had that health come at all. So
It's almost always children.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's the really early onset.
Right.
So thank you everybody who's been watching. And I'm really happy with I have a couple messages here sent to my inbox, so I'll check those out as well and send you if there's any questions there, because sometimes people will want to ask a question, but they don't want it public. So
Good.
yeah, I'll answer you soon, whoever's messaging me. Anyways, Claire, I'm just so happy that you explained so much of your journey and what you've gone through. Before we end here, is there anything else that you would like to share about your journey? It could either be some words of wisdom, or it could be like a certain experience that you want to share that we didn't get to.
Just keep, the people told me this. This is another thing people told me that I couldn't hear early on, and I certainly understand now. You are intrinsically valuable whether you can play music or not. Like, you as a human being are intrinsically valuable to a lot of people, whether you can play music or not. So you have to keep that in mind. Like, you're a full human, not just a musician. So that's just part of you. So keep that in mind. Those of you who are dealing with this, you're going through a hard time. I totally get it. So just remember that you have value with or without your instrument.
Thank you, Claire. Some really great words of advice and wisdom there for everyone. And I know there's been quite a few sax players that reach out to me all the time about dystonia. And I usually always just forward them to you, because I don't know very many sax players that I haven't come across. I know there are plenty out there, but for some reason, I don't really come across a lot of people who have experience just getting help or general. Usually the people that reach out to me are just diagnosed like recently.
Yeah.
So, thank you for always helping people who I send your way, and talking to them and just letting them know about your journey as well. So Claire, thank you so much. I honor your journey as a musician too. I'm really happy that you're playing drums, and I'm so sorry when I was in Colorado, I didn't, have any opportunity to just come out and watch all the time. But if I'm ever in the area again, I definitely will, and I'm hoping that I can eventually work my way back there because I really did love living in Colorado. So
Thank you so much for having me, Katie.
you're welcome, Claire. I hope you have a good day and that you're staying safe.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.